The transition from the fourth generation of home video game consoles to the fifth was one of the biggest events in video game history, mainly due to the advancement of three-dimensional graphics, larger storage spaces, and CD sound quality. The fifth generation of home video game consoles consists of the Sony PlayStation, the Sega Saturn, and the Nintendo 64. In terms of sales, the PlayStation dominated the market, but in terms of popularity, the argument can be made for Super Mario 64. Arguably, the most iconic item from the fifth generation of consoles is Nintendo's Super Mario 64, and deserves to be in the National Video Game Museum because how it revolutionized the platforming genre, how it began the transition from games from 2D to 3D, and how its influence can be seen in games that succeeded. Super Mario 64 is Nintendo's first three-dimensional platforming video game, but it is certainly not the first 3D platformer ever. It's the sixth, with the first five being Bubsy 3D, Alpha Waves, Geograph Seal, Jumping Flash, and Bug. It isn't the first, but it certainly made the biggest impact not only for the platforming genre, but in the video game industry as a whole. The game was developed alongside the Nintendo 64's development cycle, so Nintendo was attempting to show everything their new console was capable of with their anticipated launch title. While Super Mario 64 is often credited with pioneering the 3D platforming genre, the games that preceded it attempted to navigate the challenges of the 3D world for players to explore. Jumping Flash and Bubsy 3D are examples of early 3D platformers that were released before Super Mario 64, but failed to achieve the same level of success and innovation. Jumping Flash, released in 1995 for the PlayStation, was one of the first games to fully feature 3D environments, but was criticized for its repetitive gameplay and limited level design. Bubsy 3D, released in 1996 for the PlayStation as well, was known for its poor controls and camera, leading to a lukewarm reception from critics and players. While these early 3D platformers may have laid the groundwork for Super Mario 64, it was ultimately the game's intuitive controls, immersive world, and unforgettable characters that set it apart and cemented its place in video game history. The game featured multiple save files, controllable camera angles, fully three-dimensional worlds, and several of these worlds for the player to explore. All of the levels can be selected and discovered by players in the game's home world, which consists of Princess Peach's castle exterior, interior, basement, courtyard, and 2 upper floors. All of these massive levels were the result of the advancement of the storage space on the game's cartridges and the faster memory on board the console's motherboards. With the levels being such a large size in comparison to 2D Mario levels being fairly short and linear, the game does not require the player to collect all of the power stars per level, and instead has a predetermined required amount of stars to unlock the next batch of levels. This way, players can choose how they want to play each level, by exploring and collecting each star, or by doing the minimum required stars to advance, or by entirely avoiding a level and collecting the power stars in different levels instead. In each level, power stars are scattered around the map and collected by doing challenges such as collecting 100 coins, or 8 special red coins, going to a certain area in the game, beating a boss enemy, interacting with non-playable characters, and of course, platforming challenges. This way, players could play the game in any way they wanted to, at their own pace, as easy as they'd like, or as difficult as possible. Super Mario 64 is a game that deserves a place in the National Video Game Museum for its lasting impact on the video game industry and its place in the museum's historical logic. As an incredible title in the 3D platforming genre, Super Mario 64 represents an important moment in the evolution of video games and their cultural significance. Its release in 1996 marked a turning point in the industry, paving the way for the era of new 3D platformers and solidifying the hegemony of video games as a mainstream form of entertainment. In terms of the museum's historical logic, Super Mario 64 fits perfectly into the cornerstone of the 3D platforming genre and a crucial title in the history of video games. Alternatively, its inclusion in the museum could also critically shift the focus from solely highlighting the most commercially successful games to recognizing the artistic and cultural significance of groundbreaking titles like Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 was met with overwhelmingly positive audience reception upon its release in 1996, and continues to be celebrated by fans today. Its intuitive controls, immersive world, and iconic characters set it apart from other 3D platformers of the time, and solidified its place as a pioneering game in the genre. Its success was reflected in the sales, with over 11 million copies sold worldwide, making it one of the most best-selling games for the Nintendo 64. Additionally, the game was praised by critics for its innovative gameplay and lasting impact on the video game industry. In contrast, many of the other 3D platformers that followed struggled to separate themselves from Super Mario 64 and failed to achieve the same level of success and acclaim. This solidified Super Mario 64's place as a standout title in the 3D platforming genre and cemented its cultural significance. After the release of Super Mario 64, consumers saw the release of many other highly successful games from Nintendo. Some of the biggest releases for Nintendo 64 include The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, Pokemon Stadium, and Super Smash Bros. These games helped to establish the Nintendo 64 as a must-have console for many players, and solidified Nintendo's position as a leader in the gaming industry. Additionally, the Nintendo 64 was home to a number of other popular games from third-party developers, such as GoldenEye 007 and Turok Dinosaur Hunter. Overall, the Nintendo 64 era was a great time for success for Nintendo and helped establish the company as a major player in the gaming world. Coming hot off the heels of Super Mario 64, a number of other Nintendo 3D platformers were released that were clearly influenced by the groundbreaking game. One example is Donkey Kong 64, which was released for the Nintendo 64 in 1999 and featured a large open-world environment, collectible items, and a variety of playable characters, much like Super Mario 64. Another example is Kirby 64: The Crystal Shards, which was released for the Nintendo 64 in 2000 and featured similar gameplay mechanics, such as the ability to collect items and use them to access new areas. Both of these games, along with many others, were clearly influenced by the success of Super Mario 64 and borrowed heavily from its innovative gameplay mechanics and design. In conclusion, Super Mario 64 is a game that deserves a place in the National Video Game Museum for its pioneering role in the 3D platforming genre, its lasting impact on the video game industry, and its overwhelmingly positive reaction from audiences. Its release in 1996 paved the way for a new era of 3D platformers and solidified the hegemony of video games as a mainstream form of entertainment. Furthermore, its inclusion in the museum could shift the focus from commercial success to recognizing the artistic and cultural significance of groundbreaking titles like Super Mario 64. Overall, Super Mario 64 is a groundbreaking title that deserves recognition and celebration in the National Video Game Museum.